is the main theory here that people have tried to use to explain why some countries are very poor and some are very rich. Modernization theory, again, it's been around for a while, like we've been talking about, but as a theory of explaining the world, there's certain people that were important. We're not going to get into those details. You can dig that on your own. But their ideas are going to be here. As a theory, it starts again with this distinction between traditional societies, in quotes, and modern societies, in quotes. There's going to be some in the middle here, of course. All right, so with this distinction, let's look at a series of differences here. Economy, we've been talking about agricultural to industrial. That's one. Institutions are very different too. Community-based versus specialized. The other term here that is used is differentiated. That's where this idea of separation in church and state is just one idea, because it has to do with putting government over here, religion over here, education over here, and say healthcare over there. That's what we've done in the Western world. We've separated our institutions. Government and religion are not the same institution in the United States. At least they shouldn't be, ideally. Other parts of the world still, you will see that religious leaders will be in government, and vice versa. And education leaders will be in government. Of course, we've got those departments, but separate institutions. Okay. Technology, developing versus advanced, population, rural versus urban. We'll talk about that. Rural just means country, right? Urban means city for us. So we'll get into that more later. Family type, extended, large families here for traditional. Smaller, nuclear families in modern societies. And then again, culture, religion, traditional versus, we can call it secular. We could say modern here too. All that means is that, again, religion is something we do in our private lives. Of course, it's very important as a public thing too, but there's a separation. We've got freedom of religion here. We're not forced to believe any religion. We've got the ability to choose. Secular means when you go to work, it's not a religious. Usually, it's not a religious event, right? You just go to work typically. The two are separate. And so we can think of examples here of traditional, how it is combined, and we'll maybe get to some of that later in the religion section. Okay, so that's the split. Again, it's a summary, it's a simplification. Oh yeah, lastly, one more, I'm sorry. Government. Typically, authoritative government to, like we mentioned earlier, democratic government. Authoritative means dictatorships, rule by power and direct control, direct physical violence, typically. So that's an important difference too. We still see that today. Okay, I'll do it here. Just a basic split. Modernization theory as a theory, again, a theory is just an explanation, trying to explain things. Goes back to this idea that all societies are going through stages of development. It's just natural for societies to develop like a living organism goes through stages of development. The theorists thought societies did the same. Also, modern societies are dependent on technology. Both technology and this idea of capital accumulation, or just capitalism, like we talked about before, as an economic system. Principles of buying and selling, profit making, and trying to build wealth. Build economies, build jobs, etc. Okay. Also, again, social institutions need to be modernized. Education, healthcare, government. What is an unmodernized system of healthcare? Well, traditional, again, usually implies not having access to clean water, medicine, good doctors, all that stuff. So, down the line, we can talk about developing government and policing. Parts of the world where people don't want to do business are usually dangerous parts of the world, and it's not safe, and you don't want to be there because it's violent, and you need that institution of government and police to have a stable society. Okay, societies, according to these theorists, lack the values and the culture necessary to become modern. Why and how? Well, there's different reasons, but the main reason, according to these theorists, is that the people themselves cling to their traditional ways. Traditional ways of growing food, traditional culture. There's also this argument here that they lack the values necessary to become successful. They're not as motivated to be rich and to have wealth. They'd rather just get by. Again, this is I'm paraphrasing from their premises, not necessarily what I believe. All right, so how do you get out of poverty? What's the plan for these nations? What's the plan for these people? Well, of course, they've got to modernize here, but importantly, they've got to follow the Western model of development. Follow the same steps, the same path, and then they'll start to reduce poverty by growing wealth. All the rest comes with it. All right, so those are some ideas for modernization theory. World systems theory is a different explanation that developed from different people, different theorists, and we'll see how it's different here next. Okay. According to world systems theory, it's not possible to separate a nation's history from a global world system. In this case, a global world system that's been around for a really long time. It's not anything new, and depending on how you look at it, it has gone through phases. The most recent great empire in history we think of, of course, we could do a lot of them, but I think of the British Empire. There's the Spanish, and of course even the Dutch were in there, and they were powerful, but the great colonizers, at one point or other, were powerful, and they had a lot of influence. Okay, so that's the world system. Some people go all the way back to Rome as one early world system, core of the world system. Okay. All right, so levels of development and wealth then can be explained today. World system theorists argue this is an influential way of looking at the world. Okay, it can be explained by looking at the nation's place, again, within the world system today. According to these people, you can't overlook colonialism, which is what we looked at earlier. We'll see some examples here in our video in a second, too. Again, what was colonialism in a nutshell? If we were to summarize it, the video did a little bit. It didn't get into that much detail. I know the first part was in French and then Spanish, I think. And then, anyway, it's hard to see that, what they're saying. But basic idea of colonialism, basic history there was what? Basically, powerful, the wealthy nations, the Britons, the Dutch, and the Spanish. What did they do? They spread across the world. They found places where there was lots of stuff they wanted. Right? What did the Spanish do? Did they go to Mexico to help the people? Some people can make that argument. That in the long run, the Spanish conquistadors actually helped Mexico to develop and modernize along the way. But in a nutshell, if we're going to take a negative, kind of critical look, which is what these people do, what did they do? They went there, they stole their stuff, they brought the stuff back to their country. Gold, resources, in some cases people. And we see the start of slavery. Okay, so colonialism. Having colonies. All the great colonial empires had colonies. Alright, so let's look at some of those just real quick. I can go back to notes if you need to. Good there. Alright. So we get the basic idea. Again, if you've taken a history class, if you're upperclassmen, this stuff is already common knowledge. But let's look at one. This is 1800. Who's the major player? 1800 looks like, yeah, Spain's one of them. Look at all of the United States here, all the way down through Mexico, South America, all through here, all the way up even to what our Dakotas now. It was all Spanish territory. All through here. They this all this region. Only this part here at this point. Well, it was the United States, of course, at that point. 1776, right, and so on. But British Empire at this point was already declining, well declining. Great Britain here controls this part of Canada, Australia still, and just starting to make inroads into India at this point. Russia has their own unique history. They did their own version of internal colonization here, and down the line. Okay, so that's 1800. Look at how the world changes, though, by 1914, especially Africa. At this point, only a few places in Africa were colonized. Africa in 1914, look at it now, is completely colonized. There's hardly a territory or area in this great huge continent that is not colonized, that is not controlled by some other country, or at this point, nation or whatever term we use. All right, so Belgium and France, here through Africa, Spain a little bit, England, UK, of course, here too, and so on. And look at India by 1914. It's completely colonized all the way up through here, all the way down through here is all British territory. And of course, Australia is entirely British. This is entirely Dutch, Indonesia here. So again, all controlled by countries here, here, and here, and here, this part of the world, essentially. Russia's doing its own thing again, colonizing all of its territory. It's interesting that Russia never colonized out past its territory, but it's such a big landing mass that...
what does the gray represent then?
Right here is uncolonized. That is, yeah, good question. There. Okay, and then by 1945, we're getting into the modern era. Africa is still colonized, almost entirely. 1945, that's, not that long ago. Africa is still almost entirely colonized. India is still colonized here, and so on. And then, many of these countries will gain their own independence here through the 50s and 60s and so on, great turmoil and so on. India's turmoil through the 1950s. Gandhi and the revolt against... Okay, so world systems theorists are going to say colonialism matters, and if we're going to explain why, real quick, this country right here is so poor, you've got to look at this idea of core nations, the powerful nations, the center of the economy, the global economy, and then the periphery nations on the outskirts. These are the colonies originally. Poor then, poor now. World systems theory says, well, it's pretty obvious why they're poor. Someone took all their stuff. That's essentially their position. Semi-periphery, somewhere in the middle. Right, so that's the basic model. Just a few points to buzz through. We've already covered this, but let's look at the points here next. Okay, so according to this theory, once again, last couple ideas. Again, it comes down to the idea of exploitation, using one nation for your profit, your gain, exploiting the periphery nations by core nations. Core changes. Spain is no longer a core, right? But they once were. Holland, of course, is no longer core. They, even a player at the time, major player in world trade. Okay, so extraction of resources plus unfair trade relations. Once trade is established, it's on an unequal playing field. All right, so to summarize world systems theory, the problem isn't traditionalism or clinging to your culture that has caused poverty, but instead the history of colonialism, and some nuts and bolts of geography, just not having the same kind of resources or access to resources. Landlocked Africa is not a good place to be if you want to do business, even today, because you got to ship and you got to send, and maybe it's arid, maybe you don't have the stuff, the product to begin with. Anyway, all that stuff matters according to this theory. got a clip here, and we'll have an assignment on it. I'll play it, and then we'll list the questions. Runs about